Welcome back. This is video number 2, and we're going to discuss personal branding versus company branding. And I want to explain both of these to you so you know exactly which route to take, and it'll make it easier to clarify things and make sure that you create the right brand specifically towards that route. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. So what I want to do now is let's just take a quick look and a closer look at these two. And we'll talk about the pros and cons so that it gives you a better way to decide for yourself which route you should take. So I want to start out by talking about what is a personal brand. Well, a personal brand is built around a person, often really good for people that are speaking, counseling, services, writing a book, being an author, even maybe a video course creator, artists, consultants, or coach. Now, if you think about this, it's a lot of one-on-one type situations where you are one-on-one with your client, or you might be speaking at conferences day in and day out. And if you really think about it, you think about many famous motivational speakers that speak in front of crowds and stadiums. A lot of times they are branding themselves, and branding themselves just makes more sense than branding a business brand. Now, if you are going down the route of personal brand, keep in mind that you may not necessarily need a logo. You can have a logo with your name in it. That's totally fine. But if you don't want to go down that route, you still need to make sure that you use the correct colors. And we'll talk about color psychology later down near the end of the video course. So that just makes more sense when you are branding yourself in this situation. Now, on the flip side, let's talk about what a business brand is. Business brand obviously is total opposite of personal brand. And in this case, a brand is built around some sort of identity or commonality that people share, who your audience is, or maybe who your audience wants to become. Or maybe your audience feels like they are an outcast from other audiences. So you can play on that. You can play on that. You can figure out what kind of identity crisis maybe that specific audience has that relates to your product. So if you think about it, many employees can share this one brand identity. Not to say that, if you have a personal brand that you can't have a bunch of employees who share that cause. They are going to share that cause, but the brand is going to have, more people sharing that one identity and they feel like they're part of it. So that's kind of something you want to think about. If you are going to be going into business and you really only want to build the brand around you and you alone, then you might just want to do personal brands. But if you want a brand on a long-term view, like if you die and your brand continues, then you might want to go down the brand route. And we'll talk more about the pros and cons in just a minute. So if we take a look at the personal brand and we take a look at the pros and the cons, the pros is that it's a lot more flexible and adaptable to one person. So flexible meaning if your interests change, for example, so does your company. So it's very, very easy to switch around identity because you are the identity. And it's easier to create really, really fast because it's you. I mean, you don't need to really think about your brand's identity because your brand's identity is you. So getting things up and running, you can really, really get it up and running fast because it's really based on your reputation. Now, if you think about it, the bad side is that it's harder to sell because it's in one name. So if you do pass away and you do die, unless you pick somebody who is going to take your place, then that business may crash and burn. So just something to keep in mind for long-term view. So it's kind of like short-term versus long-term view. That's not to say that if you pass away that people are not going to buy. They might buy, but they're going to probably rebrand your name and just keep your customers. And it's just easier to sell and increase your profit if you have an actual brand. Now, on the bad side also is that the business can be tainted quickly dependent on one's reputation. So one versus many. So if you happen to do something or doing something shocking, then your brand as a person goes down the drain. If you think about a lot of like politicians and a lot of scandals or even famous celebrities, they build this brand and this brand is huge. But then when they say something like really, they say something racist or they say something prejudiced, or they just say something that's just shocking to society, then their whole personal brand goes down the drain. I mean, we've seen this in cases where people have said certain things and their whole line of cookware just goes down the drain. And you see that with other cases as well. So that's the only downside with a personal brand. Now, on the flip side, we have the business brand. And let's take a look at the pros and the cons. So the pros about a business brand is it's easier to sell. So long-term versus short-term. And it's not based on your personal reputation or the reputation of anyone. So a brand, employees can come in, come out, CEOs can come in and come out, and the brand still stays the same. So it's a lot easier to sell when you have a brand built. Because if you think about it, when it comes to selling a personal brand, like I said earlier, it's a lot harder to sell. With a business brand, it's a lot easier to sell because of the long-term view versus short-term view. Now, another pro is that change is easier. It's kind of the many versus one mentality. So that brand can have different products and services, or it could be a hub to many different companies below it or sister companies. You can also have a common identity, so people relate to your brand. Like I talked about earlier, if you have a personal brand, yes, they might feel like they agree with your cause, but as far as the common identity goes, the business brand would be the way to go. Now, the bad side or the cons is that it is harder to create. I mean, it takes longer. Sometimes it takes months, or I've seen some brands take 6 months or even a year to create, because that's how much research and all that is given into trying to figure out the common identity, trying to figure out the colors that reveal and create some sort of commonality with that identity. Now, another con is that it's not as easy to change interests once established. So once you have created that identity, it's hard to create the identity or change that identity to something else, because the logo and everything else has been made for that particular identity. Another cons is it's not as flexible as the personal brand.